Hello and welcome to Inside View. I'm your host, Joel Metzger, and joining me today is Mitch Dion, who is the General Manager of the Calaveras County Water District. Mitch, welcome.
Thank you. Good to be back again.
It's good to have you back. How long have you been in your position, roughly?
12 months, 2 days.
12 months, 2 days. Wow.
But who's counting?
So how's it been for you so far?
It's been busy. It's been an exciting year, and frankly, we've taken on a lot of challenges and grown a lot, and so it's been a really fast year.
Are you, in retrospect, looking back, and are you pleased with the decision to come and join the team here?
Overall, it's been a good decision. It's an exciting place to come and work and really to serve the community in a way that I hadn't expected. Finding that water and wastewater services are certainly a more integral part of this community and the center of a lot of discussions that, frankly, when you're doing these things in other places, you're more of an ancillary type of service. Here, we tend to be much closer to the focus of the community.
Were there any other things that you didn't really expect, but you've come to find were somewhat surprising?
Well, I think ultimately just simply the diverse needs of the community. While I was familiar with the Calaveras County geographics, as that plays out into the community and how the demographics work, has been a bit challenging, and has also been really a great learning experience because you get to experience people who have all kinds of different backgrounds here.
And as we go through this interview, we'll talk about the many things that have happened in this last year. And this has got to be a banner year. I mean, when are you ever going to have quite so many things happen? I don't know. It's going to be tough to beat this year.
Well, I guess you'd have to define what makes a banner year. But yes, it's been a very exciting year. Everything from going through just starting and learning a new job and in new communities, but also to go through the rate hearing process in the way that it went down, to initiate some cultural changes within the organization to try to lead a new organization, a leaner, more efficient organization coming out, and then ultimately the delivery of those capital projects that are necessary, all on the backbone of moving into a new facility.
A lot going on. But before we get into those things, I wanted to give you a chance to introduce yourself to those who have never seen you on this program or met you before. So who is Mitch Dion and where did he come from?
Well, that's a long answer to the question, but ultimately I grew up in the Sacramento area, in the foothill communities just outside Sacramento. I had spent a number of years in the Marine Corps. I was trained as an engineer and developed a passion for water, wastewater, and certainly it was only matched by my passion for the Sierras and no desire to come back to a community that would give me access to what I really enjoyed in life, as well as being close and to family at this point in our lives. So. And
I wanted to remind you of one of your first experiences with water and wastewater. Was it at a boys' camp?
It was a outdoor education camp, a school district-owned camp near Soda Springs.
Okay.
And ultimately, that was my first experience operating water and wastewater systems, yes.
And how old were you at that point?
Well, I learned to do that and took the operation when I was 17.
When you were 17 years old. And at that point, you were fascinated by those things, but you didn't necessarily think to yourself, well, this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life, right?
No, that wasn't the first thing that struck me as I was dealing with wastewater at that point in my life.
Okay. After your time serving in the military, you spent a lot of time kind of hopping around in some rather interesting jobs. Could you just touch on a couple of the positions that you held between military and now?
Sure. I spent a little bit of time up in Washington State as a college administrator. I went to work for a community college system and enjoyed working in the community college system. But I found working in the public works or the water, wastewater arena, so I moved back into the public works system within the city of Lacey. And was their water resources manager overseeing their water utilities. So when you're working in the state of Washington and people talk about water, it sort of loses its interest to some folks, but I found it an exciting place to be. Believe it or not, in the state of Washington, they still have lots of water challenges. And so working and developing water and wastewater systems in the state of Washington was a great background. I spent a lot of time learning about hydraulic modeling, learning about the infrastructure components and putting things together in a way that could deliver those the integrated services to the community. Came back to the Sacramento area. I oversaw a large utility in the Sacramento area and did that for a number of years and found myself traveling throughout the western states more than I wanted to travel. We went to northern Nevada and worked on the Lake Tahoe side in Douglas County as a community development director there, overseeing their water and wastewater, and then ultimately went down to San Diego because if you're living in Lake Tahoe, it's hard to find better places to live. So went to San Diego and was managing a water utility and was on the board of directors for the San Diego County Water Authority for a number of years and was active and involved with their ocean desalination plant.
And then Calaveras County somehow attracted you.
It was a chance to almost come home. It was a chance to come back into the foothill communities and live in the kind of place that I've always wanted to live.
And here you are living fairly close to the county. You have a little bit of a commute still, but you spent a year here. Have you had a chance to further explore Calaveras County? I know a year ago you were interested in seeing more of the county than you already had.
We continue to do that whenever possible. My son and I break out whenever we can and get out and explore the county. So as a result, we continue to just experience living in Calaveras County.
Very, very cool. I love the county myself, and I know someone like you who appreciates the outdoors has a lot to see here.
You can't see enough of it. It's absolutely amazing.
So tell me, now that you've been in this position for a year and you've kind of gotten a handle on it, I think you had a handle very early on actually, but to someone who doesn't know what CCWD is and what you do, how would you describe your job?
Well, first you have to understand Calaveras County Water. Calaveras County Water District is responsible for providing the water and wastewater services for a large portion of the county. Our service area overlays the entire county. And so by default, that often means that we become the receiver of smaller utilities as they can no longer provide the services that they were intended to provide, in addition to providing the services to our core group of customers that are already there. So we have a widely disseminated customer base. We provide water services in at least 7 different areas within the county, and we have 13 different wastewater facilities that deal with wastewater at one level or another throughout the county. And so ultimately that spreads our services out to all 4 corners of the county, and we have almost an 1,100 square mile service area to cover.
Which is huge.
Which is huge.
Part of how you're able to keep all these systems maintained is through a program of kind of remote monitoring. Just quickly, is that SCADA? Is that what it's called?
We do have SCADA, which is a remote monitoring and control system. And so it's a radio-based system that gives us our sensors out in the field indicators of how the various systems are performing. But more importantly, it's backed up by the human component. We have operators that are out in those facilities, and they're out doing their rounds and maintaining and watching and doing system improvements. And then, of course, we always have to respond to whatever issues come up. Particularly, pipe breaks become a fairly newsworthy event because we've managed to have some pipe breaks at some untimely times that get a little bit of attention. So, but the crews are get to them pretty fast, and they're very good at getting them patched up.
Where does the water come from that serves the county for the most part?
It's a variety of sources. Ultimately, for us, we have our major source of water for the large customer base in Ebbets, what we call the Ebbets Pass system, which is comes off the Stanislaus River. It actually comes through our tunnel system at a tunnel tap just above Murphy's. We treat it there, and then ultimately we pump it all the way back up the system beyond Arnold.
So you bring the water down the hill and then pump it all the way back up the hill?
We do.
That seems inefficient, but is there any other way to do it?
Currently, there's no other way to do it. Obviously, the people that had looked at this system had looked for other ways to bring it above and use the gravity coming down. But ultimately, you have to get it out of the Stanislaus River Canyon anyway, so you're pumping either at the top to get it out of the canyon or you bring it out via gravity like we currently do and then pump it up as a treated product. So the net wash and power is probably not as significant as it would seem on the surface.
I see. It makes sense. How many staff members make this system run smoothly?
Well, we have 64 that keep it running smoothly, and then I'm the one that probably keeps it from running smoothly. The 64 staff members do a variety of functions, everything from the operations of the plants to the distribution system maintenance, the meter reading, the billing, the collection component, the administration, the engineering, and so as well as keeping our equipment running. So there's a whole variety of people that are employed by CCWD.
Quite a lot to be done, for sure. Is that staff number down from, let's say, 2007? Or
That staff number is down significantly by almost 20 positions. So it's ultimately, we will continue to probably be able to leverage efficiencies, but that staff number is going to be held pretty consistently for the next few years.
Is that something that's fairly important to you as a GM, to keep the staff who are working for you employed?
What's important to me is that they continue to be engaged and actively employed. I think we have probably about the right number of people. As people tend to retire, we'll evaluate those positions and maybe look for efficiencies, retrain, do some cross-training, moving people into the skill sets that are more necessary to deal with the challenges of a water system today. So we go increasingly, the regulatory component is more and more a burden, and so the skill sets that go with monitoring, testing, doing an analysis, those types of skill sets take a new level of training.
How many customers do you serve on the water and wastewater side?
On the water side, it's just under 13,000 connections. And on the wastewater side, it's about 4,800 connections.
So in water alone, we're looking at about a quarter of the county, somewhere in there?
Probably a little over a quarter.
A little
of the
bit
county.
more.
Yeah.
So that's a very, very large percentage. And then a variety of other water districts and wastewater districts service the rest, is that?
That's correct.
Okay.
So for instance, here in San Andreas, there's Calaveras Public Utility District, and they take their water off to McCollum, and so ultimately that comes across from McCollum here to San Andreas.
So big operation, lots to do. Your job description, you said you kind of need to know what CCWD is before we talk about you, but how do you see your role in the?
My job is kind of a multifunctional level. Obviously, I'm the chief executive or the primary administrator within the agency, so it's my job to make sure that all the administrative tasks are actually being accomplished. It's my job to also be the water resources person within the agency. So using my background, I'm able to be active in managing and working with state and other local agencies and in engaging in our three primary watersheds. We have the McCollum, we have the Calaveras, and we have the Stanislaus. So being active and involved with the water resources in those watersheds is a primary duty I spend a lot of time doing. And then ultimately we have a legislative and regulatory component that I also am very active in, ensuring that the district's needs and interests are advocated for at a legislative level.
Have you ever considered cloning yourself?
No, mostly I just kind of have this split personality, and sometimes I meet myself coming and going.
Okay. I mean, it sounds like you're a very busy man.
Day to day, it's more busy than not, but it's better to be busy than to be not busy enough.
This is true. You also have a board, which what's their relationship to you, and then the?
Well, the board of directors for any special district, we are a special district, so we are an arm of government, and the primary purpose of that board is to oversee the chief executive to make sure that I'm performing the job in accordance with their goals and priorities. They're the folks that establish the vision for the district, and it's up to them to ensure that I'm going the direction and fulfilling their expectations. So I am their only employee. And I'm responsible to make sure that the district is administered in a way that fulfills their obligation for their fiduciary obligation to the ratepayer. And that's the primary role that a board of directors in a public agency performs. We're fortunate. We have board members that are actually active and engaged, and they're doing all kinds of things that help promote our agency and in the state, which has given Calaveras County Water District and Calaveras County ratepayers a unique position. We are often sought out, and we are starting to get into a position where we can shape the opinion on a statewide agenda. A good example of that is the statewide Headwaters initiative. You know, we've had a lot of discussion about the Bay Delta, the Bay Delta, the Bay Delta. I'm sure people are tired of hearing it. The reality is the source of a lot of this, most of California's water, at least 50% of it, is the Sierras. And yet people have not realized it's the Sierras that are the source, not the Delta. And so addressing the needs in the watershed is a key initiative that has been promoted and advocated for by Calaveras County Water.
And it's kind of been an uphill battle historically because source counties like Calaveras are very small when you look at the big players representing large population centers like Los Angeles, where some of this water ends up. And I know that you and others have struggled with, you know, how do you make your voice heard and how do you get listened to when you're going up against these big guys? So how have you been able to do that?
Well, the first thing is to change the relationship. We're not necessarily going up against them. We need to make sure that we are seen as being responsive and responsible people. Ultimately, if we're going up against them, it's like standing in front of a train and expecting it to veer. It's not going to. But if we can be articulate and engage these people in a way that is rational and get our needs communicated in a way that they can be fulfilled, that's where we're going to win, and that's how we're working these relationships. So the first piece was to establish working relationships so that you have credibility both with the larger agencies, but also so that they can understand our needs and our interests so that we can look for the common ground.
What are the dangers of not doing all this legwork that you're doing? What could potentially happen?
Well, by not doing the legwork, by not being at the table, if you will, and communicating your needs, you're going to be totally ignored, which may have been a condition that mountain counties and mountain communities in the past have often been totally ignored. An expression of that is even in the state water plan. It was recently published by the state of California. It doesn't even address the Sierras as being the source of the water that the rest of the plan is talking about how they're going to manage. And so ultimately making sure that they understand that these communities exist and the needs of these communities have to be addressed in the water plans and the planning for. We can't have resources continue to be extracted from these communities and not have the needs and interests of our long-term sustainability addressed. We are dependent upon our agricultural community here. Our ranching community is dependent upon water. We are dependent upon the tourism economy here. We certainly see a interest in our vineyards and wineries and bringing people through. And ultimately, those have in addition to our energy, our hydroelectric plants, are all part of our economic programs that are important to this community. And without water, many of those interests can't exist.
And as you've said, without enough water for future growth, then growth can't happen either, which is why protecting the water we have is of great importance.
And it goes beyond using. It goes beyond protecting it. It means that we're actually using it for those intended purposes. Not all growth is the same kind of growth, and so we need to be strategic. And that's for the county supervisors to decide how and what we're going to grow for, in a participatory process and supporting the general plan to make sure that residential growth is planned for, and it gets accommodated in the places that the county supervisors, who are the land use planners, determine it's best suited. But we have other kinds of economic growth. If we want to continue to see our ranching or agricultural interests going, where are those interests going to be, and how can we get water to fulfill their needs?
So lots to plan for. You said the board is an active and engaged board, which is really nice to hear, that they're not just maybe doing the least expected of them, but they're going beyond that. But I know there was a shift in the board recently in terms of who the president was. So who is the new CCWD board president?
The president of the board of directors is Scott Radaman.
Scott Radaman. And has he been on the board for a while?
Scott's only been on the board a short while, actually just a few years. I think he's in his third year. So Scott had been the vice president last year, and he has rotated, which is kind of the common practice of special districts, is a year at the vice president, and then rolling up and rotating into the role of the presidency is kind of the more traditional function. It's not a particularly controversial role. In fact, one of the downsides of being the president is your primary function is to make sure that you facilitate the meeting, and your opinion matters less than those that you have to listen to.
So more responsibility and less weight with your opinion.
Absolutely,
All right.
and no more pay.
But you have that fancy title, president.
You get the satisfaction of knowing that setting the agenda is the primary duty of the president, and making sure that that the board meetings function in a very smooth, productive manner.
Who's the new VP?
Jeff Davison. Jeff Davison is the longest-serving member of the board of directors. So we have the longest-serving member of the board of directors and the shortest-serving member of the board of directors. And so ultimately, those two will serve as the executive leadership of the board of directors.
Now, is there any compensation for serving as a CCWD board member?
There is. They do receive a per diem for attending a board meeting and several other approved meetings, up to 7 meetings during the course of a month.
In the last meeting, there was a decision about sending bills out, and there was a change in what bills get sent out. Can you kind of walk us through that decision and what led up to it?
Sure. What was going on is within our agency, we hold the property owners responsible for the water bill. It's not only just a casual term, but it truly means that they are responsible. The water and the unpaid bill belongs to the property owner. So those property owners that are involved with commercial or particularly rental property, the commercial activity and the rental housing in particular, often had their tenants paying the bill. And so there would be a bill sent, and sometimes even the property manager. So there would be a bill sent to the property owner, a bill sent to the tenant, and a bill sent to the property management entity. And so there'd be 3 bills going out for every rental property, as opposed to a more typical residential property, which is 1 bill, 1 property owner. And so the cost of doing this additional billing was about $20,000 a year. And so ultimately, because the property owner is in fact going to be responsible for that bill, we felt it was the most efficient way to deal with this type of thing was just to send the 1 bill to the property owner. There's some other tools available that by going online, the tenant on an account can see what's due and continue to pay the bill if that's the arrangement the property owner chooses to make with the tenant. Similarly, a property management company can also use the online tool to see what is due and whether or not it's paid. So the online mechanisms are there for the other 2 traditional billing recipients that normally be there. But ultimately, the obligation is still the property owner. So the property owners then now can make their choice. They can either just put the bill, make the typical cost of water or sewer part of the rent, or they can facilitate a mechanism in which they communicate to the tenant or to the property manager what's due and collect it either with each month's bill or in the arrears by waiting a month. So there's different mechanisms which they're going to have to deal with in order to get there. But the key was they also have the online mechanism to come in and take a look at what's due. So the property managers in particular, they're commercial, so they're not going to be limited by lack of connectivity to come in via the internet and see what the bills do.
But this change has caused some community unrest in terms of this is traditionally how it was. Are you finding that there's been a big community backlash, or are you not hearing much about it?
I wouldn't say that there's a big community backlash. Certainly, change is difficult. I'm not sure our online mechanism is as smooth as it maybe should be or could be. So, we're going to learn of ways that we can perhaps enhance the service. Again, the idea is to reduce our costs, use those online tools as much as possible, and basically try to work with those folks in their needs so that we are not placed between a tenant and landlord relationship.
I want to go into the rate increases because that was probably the biggest thing that happened this year in terms of the community getting involved. The proposals were put out, and you guys explained why you wanted to increase the rates. Then there were a number of community meetings, and many people voiced various opinions about the rate increases. And there was an opportunity for people to get enough names, and then the rate increase couldn't happen, but that was not reached by people, even though there were some movements to do that. And the rates eventually went up, not quite as much as was initially proposed. I think the board bid off a little bit less than they had initially thought they might. But the rates are raised now, and you've been getting them for the higher rates for a couple months now, is that
Sure.
right?
The first step of the new rates have stepped in, and that went into effect in September. Okay. And so as of now, we've collected the first month it was like $30,000 because again, the September billing is we bill every other month. So the beginning of November, then we received the first significant monies coming in, and so ultimately we have received the first influx of that new rate coming in now.
And those rates are going to generate about $18 million over the next 5 years, is that correct?
That's about correct, yes.
And that's going to fund a list of projects, and we have that list here. We can't go over every single one right now, but just to give people an idea, what are some of the main ones?
If I could, I want to go back and say one of the things that the board did was they also made sure that this rate increase was solely for the purpose of funding these capital projects. This was not going to offset O&M expenditures or any other type of use. This was solely to go back in and address the capital needs of the district. So we had a very, very large capital program. It was about $26 million worth of projects here on the list, and there's about $18 million coming in the next 5 years to fund. That's $26 million worth of work.
And we're getting very close to running out of time, but this is things like replacing pipes that seem to be breaking all the time, putting new tanks in, making wastewater treatment plants updated and upgraded, and all kinds of things across the whole county, it looks like.
Yeah, generally speaking, it is all kinds of things across the county. There are some focus points, and the focus points that we had to deal with was some of our transmission lines. These are water lines that are high pressure, they're old, they're failing, and they're creating spectacular failures when they do go, and they're failing frequently. So we have several miles of line that we have to replace. Primarily that's going to occur up in the Ebbets Pass area starting this spring. In fact, we're on the rush to get some of that done because Caltrans is going to come in and do some road work, and we don't want to be the typical utility that comes in and cuts a new road. So we're in a push to get that done in front of Caltrans so we get some new pipeline up there. We're also looking at some of our wastewater and regulatory concerns down, particularly at the Lake Tulloch area, in the Poker Flats area. We've got lift stations under construction right now that we're in trying to rebuild so that we don't have sewage spills going into Lake Tulloch. And so we've commenced on the first of those. And then the third one, which is broader and district-wide, is dealing with our water tanks. Getting in and doing the recondition of those water tanks so that the high-quality water that we have, we then put into a good tank so that it doesn't start to get degraded at the tank before we put it in the transmission lines, which then give it to the distribution system.
Mitch, I'm going to have you back to talk more about this, but I appreciate you taking the time to join me on the show.
Absolutely, and I would like to wish you and your family and everyone out there a Merry Christmas and a successful New Year.
And thank you for joining me on this edition of Inside View. I'm your host, Joel Metzger, and hope to see you next time.